Greetings, fellow seekers of excellence. Welcome to a brand new Scrumcademy episode where we unleash Scrum and Agile. I am Grand Scrum Master Scott, your guide on this journey to empower you with the knowledge you need to excel in all your Agile endeavors, your guide to unlocking the true potential of the Scrum Framework. I'm thrilled to be your companion on this journey of transformation. In today's episode, we embarking on a transformational adventure, equipping you with the knowledge and the insights you need to navigate through the complex landscape of product development like a true champion. Join us as we proudly present Mastering the Scrum Framework, your roadmap to delivering legendary customer value. As we delve into this episode, you'll uncover the keys to navigating the intricate pathways of the Scrum Framework. Each element from the accountabilities, formerly roles, the events, the artifacts, and the core values serve as your guiding light on your quest with one ultimate goal: delivering legendary value for your customers, of course. Whether you're a seasoned Scrum practitioner eager to sharpen your skills, or a curious newcomer ready to harness the power of Scrum for building legendary products, teams, and organizational cultures, this episode is tailor-made for you. We're here to break down the complexities of the Scrum Framework into actionable steps, equipping and empowering you with proven strategies that lead to extraordinary outcomes. Don't miss out on this epic journey towards Scrum and Agile excellence. Hit that subscribe button right now and ring that notification bell so that you're the first to know when we drop each episode. We have a treasure trove of super duper legendary content waiting in the product backlog, and I want you to be the first to access and execute on it. Together, we're about to unravel the magic of the Scrum Framework, turning it into your ultimate roadmap for delivering legendary customer value. Get ready to transform your approach to Agile and embark on a quest to deliver nothing short of legendary customer value. We're setting sail on a fantastic voyage. Woo! By Lakeside. Fantastic Voyage. Yeah. We're setting sail on a fantastic voyage like Lakeside through the Scrum Framework, leading you to the ramp of achieving nothing less, nothing short of legendary product delivery. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Mastering the Scrum Framework, your roadmap to delivering legendary customer value. On your screen here, I have the entire Scrum Framework. It's already filled out because I want you to begin this journey with the end in mind. This is where we're going to land. We're going to take a step back and go through each and every piece of these items and just get started with Scrum. There are 16 pieces to the Scrum Guide. It baffles me that most people forget about that. Yeah, there are 16 pieces to the Scrum Guide, and we will talk about that in more detail when we begin to lay this out ourselves. There are also 16 pieces of Agile. If you add 16 and 16, you get the number 32. So you might have seen my logo, and you might have seen me on social media. I always reply back to people, be legendary with the transformational 32. Well, now you get an idea of what I mean when I say that if you did not have the luxury to take my class. If you do all 16 pieces of Scrum, you will be an above average Scrum Master, Scrum team, organization. If you also add the 16 pieces to the manifesto of Agile software development, you will be extraordinary. That's why I call it the transformational 32, and that destination will lead you to become legendary. Let's dive into that and see how do we get to this place. I haven't taught on Agile yet. That will be my next video. So I definitely want to go into that. That way you will have all the items you need to have a rock solid foundation from which you're going to continue to learn, which you're going to continue to have assumptions and hypotheses. You're going to continue to run experiments, and you're going to continue to learn from those experiments that didn't go according to plan. Remember, we want to fail fast so that we can learn from our mistakes and figure out what is the right thing to do here what is the right way. I don't look at this environment as a best practice. In fact, when I hear that word best practices, it really concerns me, especially if we're working in a complex environment. I mean, what best practice are you going to have to predict what Mother Nature is going to do? Good luck with that approach. We'll talk about those things in Scrum that will help us with that. Okay? We're doing something, don't know really how to get to our destination. All that's built into the framework if you just utilize the framework the way it was intended. With that said, let's dive into it. Now, I want to take a step back because in most cases, you are going on a team that is already doing Scrum, joining an organization that's already doing Scrum, and in most cases, they're doing Scrum wrong or Scrum is not complete. So you are going to be there to implement the totality of Scrum. Hopefully in your career, you will have the opportunity, the luxury at some point in time to take some team from some other methodology. You are the one that's going to show them how we do things over here in Scrum and Agile. Before we can get started with Scrum, there are some things that we have to have in place. I want you to visualize playing a board game with your family, maybe on the weekend, maybe on a holiday. Right now, I'm visualizing the game in my mind called Monopoly. Well, first of all, you're going to read the rules to the game, which you've already done. This is episode number 2. The first episode was the Scrum Guide. If you haven't listened to that yet, please go listen to that right after this call. Also, take out the Scrum Guide and follow along with me as I'm going through the framework. That way we can use this kind of like as a study session. The more you look at this stuff, the more you read it, the more it will reveal itself to you. Now, you're going to have to read some other supplemental stuff. You might even want to join me for a class that will expedite your learning curve, but you don't have to do that. You can do self-study. That's certainly the way I did it, but it took me 6 months to do that. And then when I finally did go to a class, I'm like, wow, I wish I would have went to a class first because that truly could have expedited my learning curve for me to really understand what is this game truly all about and how do I play it at a high level. I'm assuming that anybody listening to this video, you want to play Scrum game at a very, very high level. So let's dive into it. So let's create a fictitious project just so we can see how we get started with the Scrum framework and some things that you probably should be thinking about. I'm thinking about Saturn. Scrumcademy, we want to take a voyage, fantastic voyage, remember? We want to take this fantastic voyage and go to Saturn. I'd like to live on one of the moons on Saturn. We can't live on Saturn itself. It's a very gaseous place. We couldn't do that, but it is predicted that out of the 82 moons that are on Saturn, probably can live on one of the moons. So, hey, how about we take a journey with Scrumcademy? Saturn is the most iconic of all the planets in the solar system. So at Scrumcademy, our mission is to get people to live on Saturn. Very nice. Now, with that in mind, we haven't even started Scrum yet. So I want to kind of show you what should you be thinking about before you even get to Scrum. Scrum is not for everybody. Scrum was fit for a specific purpose, and we'll talk about that in a second. We're talking about going to Saturn in this fictitious project that we're getting ready to start to learn the overview of the Scrum framework. So what do we need in place to do that? Well, visualize this framework as a board, a game board, like into Monopoly. You've already read the instructions. You have selected your role, things of that nature. But that's where we haven't even started Scrum yet. We're just getting things in place before we even start the game. Just to repeat, you have read the rules of the game, the Scrum Guide. This is the framework, what we're showing you now. Think of that as the game board, if you will. This is just to give you a visual representation of what is going on within the framework. You've already read it before this episode. Now I'm going to do my best to try to bring it to life to you just a little bit more by giving you this fictitious project. We know from the Ralph Stacey diagram that there are 4 different domains of complexity of work. So let's go through those right quick. If this is a simple domain, that means we know everything up front. Your traditional project management was made for that particular domain of complexity. So can we use with project management, traditional project management, be the best approach for us to get to Saturn? Probably not, because we know very little about getting and living there. So we have a lot to explore. So we can't plan everything up front and then execute that plan. That's fair enough. Let's go to the next level. Is this a complicated domain that we're in? Complicated means there's more known than unknown about what we're trying to do. Now, in that domain, that was my first job when I worked at General Motors back in the 1990s. I got introduced to a methodology called Lean and also a methodology called Six Sigma. Now, both of those methodologies assume that you have something already in place and that you want to make it better. Are you tracking? Very nice. Now, the third level in the Ralph Stacey diagram is complex domain of work. Now, in that environment, there's more unknown than known about what you're trying to do. Now, of all the methodologies that I'm aware of out there in the market that are proven, let me specify, that are proven, you really only have two choices. You either have Scrum or you have the scientific method, where we're going to plan something. We're going to do something. Plan, do, check, act. We always introduced to the scientific method. What about elementary school? If you're here in the United States, we want to do something to either prove or disprove that hypothesis. And based upon that experiment, we're going to learn from that and make another experiment. That's the same thing that Edison did 999 times to create the light bulb. Now, we're talking about Saturn. What domain does it live in? It lives in a chaotic domain, which means there's very little known about the 82 moons that surround Saturn. And we're talking about going to live there. I'm thinking Scrum is going to be the best tool that we're going to use to help us realize our goals and our mission of living on Saturn. Now, notice something. I didn't say anything about it will help us get to Saturn faster. I didn't say nothing like that. It's a huge myth that Scrum and Agile will deliver faster. No, Scrum and Agile does not promise to deliver faster. It promises to deliver value to our customers sooner. There is a huge difference. Now, looking at this framework, let's dive into stakeholders' requirements. What are some things that we're going to need to make this journey to Saturn? We have to figure out how to build a rocket specifically. We want a whole lot of people. We need to make it affordable. So we're going to create a reusable rocket would be one of the items that we have as a requirement. What are some of the other requirements? Go ahead and use your imagination and begin to think about all the things that we possibly going to need to make this mission happen. To get started, the question I want to pose for you is, where do we keep requirements? Those things that we're talking about, where do we keep those things in Scrum? Well, you need 4 things to get started with Scrum. So let's begin to go to the framework now that we have prefaced that by giving us a project and some things to think about. Again, this will be your first ever sprint with the Scrum team, and this is to give you some practice. Hopefully you get the opportunity to take a team from some other methodology over to Scrum. So those are some of the things that you was thinking about before you got to this point. Now we're ready to get the things in place so that we can play this game called Scrum. We have a project. To get started with this game called Scrum, we need 4 things. Well, let's first of all go to the accountabilities. Just like you playing a board game at home with your family and friends, you're going to need some characters in the game. Yeah, if we play Monopoly, you got the car, you got the horse, you get the idea. In Scrum, we have 3 characters in this game. We have developers. These are the people who actually do the work. We have the product owner. Product owner is the visionary of the product. I like to think of this person as the mini CEO. Think of this person as an entrepreneur. They have the final say in terms of the ordering of the product backlog, and is the visionary of what we're doing as a Scrum team. And then there's the Scrum Master. Now, again, pull out the Scrum guide and follow me as I go through this. We have developers. These are the people in the Scrum team that are committed to creating any aspect of a usable increment each sprint. AKA, these are the people doing the work. Now, Scrum was made for IT. I don't know of a domain that Scrum has not penetrated yet. I'm thinking about the marketing department, the sales department. Developers is a blanket word, not just a programmer per se. Here's an easy sentence for you to remember. These are the people who actually do the work. So if we come up with a marketing campaign, I'm thinking about the designer. I'm thinking about somebody might be writing some content. I'm thinking about if it's going to be a video, maybe that person is creating the video, editing the video, producing the video, whatever it may be. I would classify all those persons up underneath the label developers because they are part of doing the work. Now, the product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of the product resulting from the Scrum team. I like to look at the product owner as the mini CEO. And who is the Scrum Master? Now, the Scrum Master is accountable for establishing Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. As defined in the Scrum Guide. Not what you think it is, not what you heard it to be, but for what it says in the Scrum Guide. So I like to think of myself as an evangelist of the Scrum Guide. As you read the Scrum Guide, did you notice something? The developers have 4 bullet points specifically called out. The product owner has 4 bullet points specifically called out. And the Scrum Master has 12 bullet points specifically called out. The Scrum Master serves the Scrum team. The Scrum Master serves specifically the product owner, and the Scrum Master serves the greater organization. Now we have the roles of this game that we're getting ready to play. We need one more thing. Remember, we have some requirements. We have a goal. So let's go to artifacts. We have all of the accountabilities on the board. Again, we haven't started Scrum yet. We're still getting things in place to start this game. We hold the requirements in Scrum in something called a product backlog. What is the product backlog? Again, you've already read that from the first episode and also from reading the Scrum Guide yourself, but the product backlog is emergent. What does that mean? Well, it means we don't know everything up front about how we're going to get and live on a moon in Saturn. We don't know that. So we just have enough to get started to see if we can make this journey happen. As we start doing this work, it will emerge. Other things will come up. We don't know what we don't know, but we have enough to get started. It will emerge. We're going to start out with a few things and it will grow from there. As you read the product backlog, the definition in the Scrum Guide, it reads a little bit weird. It's an ordered list of what's needed to improve the product. Wow, that's kind of weird. We haven't even built anything. Scott, you just said we haven't even started Scrum yet. So how is it that we're going to improve something that we haven't built? Well, that's the point. We know that before we even built it, it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be another iteration. Think about the first ever cell phone. Think about the first ever computer. They're still going through iterations from the very first one that was brought to market and still is. It's going to be an awful lot of iterations that will go on for us to get it to a point where it's good enough. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for good enough. Now, the product backlog is going to hold our requirements. In order for a product backlog to be a product backlog, it must be ordered. What does that mean? Well, if you look at this visual here, this looks like a rectangle. It looks like a stack. Yes, it is a stack. We assume that the thing that's on the very top is the most important thing for the Scrum team to be doing. And as you can see, going down, you have bigger rectangles, wider rectangles. We assume that those items are less important at this particular time, according to the visual of the ordering of the product backlog. And we also can see that looking at the size of the rectangle, that work is probably a bit bigger than what's at the top. Very nice. We also know in the Scrum Guide that the product backlog is committed to the product goal. So what is our product goal? Well, our product goal is to get people to live on Saturn, specifically one of the 82 moons that are there. We need to figure out which of the 82 that we can actually live on. So just to recap where we are, product backlog is committed to the product goal. Product goal is a long-term objective for the team. It answers the question of why are we doing this project in the first place? You'd say 4 things. There's actually 5 things that we actually create before we even start sprint. The definition of done. The definition of done in Scrum means quality and completeness. Quality and completeness. I want you to think about when you hire somebody to come to your house or do work for you, that you tell them what you need done. In my mind, that puts you in a position of the product owner. Because you have an idea of what you want. You have a vision of what you want. You're going to talk to somebody who you hired, probably paying some money to get this work done, or making a trade, whatever it may be. I would say that person is involved. So just bear with me for a moment as I, help your brain pull these pieces together so that you can see the definition of done. So you are telling this person or persons what you want done, and then y'all have an exchange of words, and that person is going to give you an estimate. Who does estimating in Scrum? I tell you, Scrum is very natural to how we would operate in our personal life. So you're going back and forth talking to this person, telling you what your requirements are. Before the end of that conversation, you both are going to touch and agree in terms of, okay, how am I going to know when I'm done? If I'm painting this wall over here, how will I know that the wall is painted? You see paint on the wall, but as a definition of done, one of the things I'm thinking about is I don't want any wall paint on my ceiling paint. I don't want any baseboard paint on my wall paint. So my definition of done, for example, could be, hey, make sure there's no wall paint on my ceiling paint, or vice versa. So we create that in the beginning before work is ever done, so that when we get to the end, we have a shared understanding of what does done look like. I'm pretty sure that if I got wall paint on my ceiling paint, that in this example, the painter is not going to get paid. What about in your example? Will that person get paid? Probably not. Why? They got paint on the wall, but it didn't meet our definition of done. I just want to make sure you knew that. Again, in most cases, you're going to be walking onto a Scrum team, and these things are already in place. Just as a reminder for those who might have just catching on mid-screen, what we're doing right now is showing you how to get started with the Scrum Framework. You need 5 things to get started with Scrum. You need some developers, you need a Scrum Master, you need a product owner, you need a product backlog to hold our requirements. And you're going to need a definition of done so that we have a shared understanding of, okay, when we get to the end of this, how will we know what we done? All right. We have those things in place. Now we are ready to start playing this game. Again, thinking about you and your family, me and my family playing this board game. We've gone through the preliminary processes. Now notice I didn't say anything about a sprint 0, but some of you have been misled. We don't have no sprint 0 in Scrum. There's no such thing. Notice I did some pre-planning, but I did not call it a sprint 0. In Scrum, every sprint is used to deliver some value. period. There is no hardening sprint. What's the difference? Well, for those of you who have heard of these terms or will hear of these terms at some point in time, sprint zero is kind of like getting everything ready to do the sprint. You was playing the game with your family. You didn't call it no sprint zero. You just, hey, this is the prep work that we need to do before we play the game, period. And then a hardened sprint is typically at the end of a sprint. That would be like if you're in IT, those are things that we're doing to get it in production and blah, blah, blah. But is that really done? No, that ain't even done. So no, there is no sprint zero. There is no hardened sprint. No, you don't see those words in the Scrum Guide. Now we're on this board. We're ready to go to the events. We're ready to start playing this game called Scrum. Now, the first thing we're going to need to do, again, this is our very first sprint. So the first thing we're going to need to do is to figure out what is a cadence. We know according to the Scrum Guide, we have up to 1 month to deliver something of value. We cannot go over a 1 month sprint time box. Notice I am drawing this box bigger. For those of you who might be new to Scrum, haven't actually been in this environment, you're reading the Scrum Guide, you know there are 5 events. There are, but your body only goes to 4 events. The sprint represents time. That's why I'm drawing it bigger so that you can understand and visualize that the other 4 events I'm getting ready to show you to this happens within inside of this container. So I want you to think about a calendar month. Okay? The sprint represents that. All right, it is the first of the month. We'll just assume it's the first day of the month. Clock is ticking. We have agreed as a Scrum team that we're going to do a 1 month sprint. Clock is ticking. The first event we're going to have is sprint planning. Sprint planning is a time box event that's 8 hours for the entire Scrum team. Who is the Scrum team? Oh, that's the Scrum Master, that's the developers, and that's the product owner. Very nice. We had sprint planning. Now, for me, typically what I do, whether it's my first team or my first day on a team that's been doing Scrum, they say for 5, 10, 20 years, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use this same strategy. I am going to facilitate each and every event for the first 1 month. Why? Because I'm going to be in teaching mode and I'm going to be in facilitating mode. So at sprint planning, we have 3 questions that we must ask. Why, what, how? Why, what, how? Why, what, how? Why is the sprint valuable? What will it take for us to achieve the sprint goal? And how will the chosen work get done are the 3 questions that we are asking and answering in sprint planning. Now, as I forestated, I'm the Scrum Master. I'm going to be facilitating this. I've already worked with the product owner before we got to this event because this is their first one. Remember, I service level to the product owners to help them understand how we do things over in this world. Okay? So I've already worked with the product owner to get the product backlog ordered in such a way that he or she is pleased with. We're now at sprint planning. We have up to an 8-hour time box to get this event done. It is for the Scrum team. Let's go. Product owner, do you have an objective for the sprint? Yes, I do, Scrum Master Scott. What would you like to get done? Scott, I would like to get the rocket done, if that's possible, the mobile launching pad, if possible. Developers, what you think about that? Well, we don't have the permit to build the mobile launching pads yet, so let's focus on building a rocket. Okay, that's cool. Product owner, you cool with that? I know that you had the mobile launching pad, the number 1 thing, and the rocket was the number 2 thing. Yeah. Should our sprint goal become, team, to build a rocket for this sprint? Everybody agrees? Yes, everybody agrees. And notice we as a Scrum team just agreed upon what is our sprint goal. Our sprint goal is to build a rocket this sprint. Very nice. That is the first question of sprint planning. We have that answer. Why is this sprint valuable to our customers? Well, we're going to build a rocket for them. We get ready to move into the second question of sprint planning. Hopefully you follow along with me in the Scrum Guide. Hopefully I'm bringing it to life for you. Yeah. Now, the developers are going to go over to the product backlog and they're going to select everything they forecast they need to achieve the sprint goal. So they're going to go over here and pull off the top item. Because remember, the product backlog is ordered from the top down. Okay, they're going to select everything they need. Now, notice something. We have our sprint goal. They're pulling in items here. What are they doing? Actually creating their sprint backlog. They pulling in items from the product backlog. Is going into the sprint backlog, which represents their work, their plan. According to the Scrum Guide, the sprint goal lives in the sprint backlog. We created the sprint goal first. And we did that in the first question of sprint planning. Let's make sure everybody tracks. As we can see here, the developers have selected quite a few things that they forecast that will achieve the building of the rocket. Is it a definite, this is everything we need? No, it's not definite. It's just a forecast. Just a forecast. Now let's move on to the third question of sprint planning. The third question is, how will the chosen work get done? At this particular point in time, the whole Scrum team is collaborating with each other. But for the last question of sprint planning, it may look and feel like this. Now, the developers are going to go talk amongst themselves. Now, remember, some of the characteristics of a Scrum team is that we are cross-functional, meaning that we have all the skills on our team to build whatever it is we're trying to build or whatever it is we're trying to do. And we also self-managing, meaning what? Meaning internally, we decide who does what, when, and how. So the developers for the last question in planning, the how, they're talking amongst themselves. We're building a rocket, so visualize who might be on that team. We're going to have some people doing the navigation system. We're going to have some people doing the engine. You get the idea. Every skill set that you can imagine that we need to build a rocket is on the team. They're called developers. They're going to actually be building a part of that rocket. So they now talking to themselves, and here's what that conversation may sound like. Hey, I'm working on the engine for the next 24 to 48 hours. I'm going to start working on this piece of the engine. Okay, the navigation person might say, hey, I'm going to start here on the navigation system. I think we have something that we've used somewhere else before, or another rocket we built. I'm going to start on that for the next 24 to 48 hours. You get the idea. So in other words, the developers are selecting their own work based upon their particular disciplines and their skill set, what they bring to the team. Cross-functional means that we have all the skills on the team. It does not mean that one person knows all these skills. Just want to make that clarification. Because when I was in manufacturing, cross-functional meant that I know how to do everybody on my team's job. But here in this context, cross-functional means that we have all the skill sets on our team to get the job done. Just want to make sure that clarification is out there for you. When the developers have assigned themselves tasks for the next 24 to 48 hours, they should be able to tell the Scrum Master and the product owner how they forecast to turn these items into a rocket to meet the sprint goal by the end of the sprint. We have a maximum time box. So in this case, we have an 8-hour time box for sprint planning. If we're done in, let's say, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, that's perfectly fine. We as Scrum Masters are making sure it does not go over the maximum time box or the time box that we have agreed upon. Now, most organizations do 2-week sprints. So I've never done a sprint planning over 4 hours for a 2-week sprint. But remember, the Scrum Guide says, usually short. The outputs of sprint planning is the sprint backlog, which includes the sprint goal. Now, the sprint backlog is owned by the developers. It is their work. It is their plan for how they intend on turning these product backlog items into the sprint goal, which in this case is the first step of us getting to Saturn, which is building a rocket. We're going to have an event called the Daily Scrum. Now, the Daily Scrum is for the developers, by the developers, for them to talk about how is the work progressing that they did in the last 24 hours. The engine person might say, hey, I started working on that engine and what I thought about yesterday is not going to work. We're going to have to start from scratch and build something brand new. I thought we were going to be able to use that, but nah. So I'm going to start working on something brand new today, and we're going to see how that goes tomorrow. Now, the navigation person may say, you know what? Oh, Google got this cool app out. We should be able to use that. We should be able to leverage Apple Maps. And we think we can, we have a nice foundation for the GPS and the navigation system, but we're going to have to modify it quite a bit, but we do have a baseline that we can use, for example. So each developer is going to go around and talk about the work that they selected in the last 24 hours. How is that work going? Then after that conversation, or during that same conversation, how is that work going? We have a 15-minute time box to have this conversation. Before we leave, the developers are going to select some more work to do for the next 24 hours because we're going to have daily Scrum again each and every work day throughout the entire sprint. But Scott, what if the product owner and the Scrum Master is their daily Scrum? Well, the Scrum Guide talks about that as well. Well, I will be a daily Scrum. Remember that this is their very first sprint. So why am I there as a Scrum Master? I am there with my teaching hat on, teaching them how to make sure this event is positive, productive, and kept within the 15-minute time box. So it's just like this. I'm thinking to myself, if somebody come to me and ask me how to ride a bicycle, I'm not just going to give them the bicycle and just throw them out there and let them ride on their own. So I'm going to give them some guidance. So what's the Scrum Master doing? Well, we don't have to facilitate any event. We just have to make sure the event happens is positive and productive. But keep in mind, this is this team's first sprint. So I'm going to be there with my teaching and facilitating hat on at the same time doing this event. I'm going to be facilitating. I'm also going to be teaching. Okay, cool. These are some ideas how you might want to run this. Now notice, after about 30 days, developers, this is your event. I'm going to walk away and y'all can run it however you want to run it because this is your event. Now, if the product owner is there at Daily Scrum, the question becomes, why are they there? Scrum Guide calls that out. Now, some product owners have been former developers, and I have had some product owners in my past that they show up at Daily Scrum because, they want to keep sharp on their coding skills. So they actually participate in development because they took on a product backlog item where they get an opportunity to write some code. And that's perfectly fine. But just make sure we playing by the rules of the game called Scrum. Let's fast forward to close to the end of the month. Clock is ticking. Getting close to the end of the month. We've been working hard each and every day. We've been going through Daily Scrum. The developers do have the rocket built, which is what? The increment. We read in the Scrum Guide, the increment must meet the definition of done. The painter must not have any wall paint on my ceiling, or vice versa. Now, in the case of this rocket, remember we created this definition of done up front because this helps developers and everybody else on the Scrum team to see that, okay, as we completing these product backlog items, first of all, does it meet the definition of done? In the Scrum Guide, as we read the increment, notice that once a product backlog item goes through the definition of done, only then do we have an increment. The product backlog item does not meet the definition of done. We don't have done work. So if it's not done, where does it go? Now notice this line here, and when we sprint review having this here collaborative working session, if it's not done, it's automatically going to go right back to where it came from, product backlog. Now, if it is done, then the stakeholders are there, they're giving us feedback. Hey, Grand Scrum Master Scott, what you think about this rocket? Is this what you got in mind for us to get to Saturn? Yeah, no, maybe. See, now we're validating our hypothesis. At sprint planning, we had a hypothesis of this is the rocket that we think Scrumcademy wants. And here at sprint review, we showing the rocket that Scrumcademy told us to build, but Scrumcademy is looking at it now and like, I don't think that's going to work. So we're going to get some feedback that goes into the product backlog for a future iteration for the product owner to do. Hopefully will help us land in a step closer to our ultimate product goal, which is to get us to live on one of the 82 moons. Now, the sprint review this is the only event in Scrum where people can just roll up on a Scrum team without an invitation. Now, let's go around to the sprint retrospective. Sprint retrospective is for the entire Scrum team, Scrum Master, developers, product owner. Now, Scott, what's the difference in the sprint review and the sprint retrospective? Well, an easy way I remember it is the sprint review is all about the product. The sprint retrospective is about the people. Y'all doing a good job playing this game. We have the 3 accountabilities in place. We have the 5 events in place. We have the 3 artifacts in place. So let's go back and recap. At the sprint retrospective, we have 5 things that we're looking at. We're looking at individuals. We're looking at interactions. We're looking at processes. We're looking at tools. And this is the formal place in which we update our definition of done. Now, notice something as this framework is beginning to emerge for you. Now, notice we have 3 different time dimensions. Now, they all here. You can very clearly see them. Now, the product backlog represents future work. The sprint backlog represents current work. The increment represents done work. Therefore, we have 3 time dimensions. We have future work, we have current work, and we have done work. Now, in every Scrum team that you go on, whether it's your first one or not, you're going to start out with these elements of Scrum, the accountabilities, the events, the artifacts. Now, this is not Scrum. This is not all of Scrum. Remember the first slide I showed you. We want to begin with the end in mind. Now, you will start out with mechanical Scrum, which means the 5 events, the sprint being a container for the other events. You have the 3 artifacts and their commitments. Okay. Now, let me briefly give you a definition of the artifact. An artifact is something made to make something transparent, according to Webster's and Oxford Dictionary. The product backlog is making transparent future work. The sprint backlog is making transparent current work. The increment is making transparent done work. Now, whether I'm doing my very first team or whether you walk onto a company that says they've been doing Scrum for a while, every Scrum team I've ever walked on that said has already been doing Scrum is really doing mechanical Scrum. I like to call it Ocean 11. And hopefully this here short, brief movie will help you understand what we mean by that. Ocean 11, what does that got to do with the framework? Well, everything. Ocean 11 is about one man robbing another man in Las Vegas. Yeah. Scott, what does that got to do with anything? Well, everything. If you want to rob your Scrum team of what they could be, if you want to rob your organization of what they could be delivering to customers, only do this. Only do mechanical Scrum. Another name for it would be zombie Scrum. I call it Ocean 11. So as you see me on social media, Ocean 11, this is what it means. You will get started here if this is your first team. This is like you riding a bicycle for the very first time. You look pretty weird riding a bicycle. You even remember that? If you don't remember, next time, pay attention to a young child look like they riding a bicycle for the very first time. It looks very mechanical, doesn't it? Look like it's almost a robot riding a bicycle, right? It looks weird, right? It's very mechanical. Yes, that's the idea. So they learning the basics. They learning the process. They getting the foundation down. They getting the rhythm down. They getting the flow down. Yeah, that's the mechanics. I call it Ocean 11. Now, how do you blow up Ocean 11? Well, if you want to blow up anything, all you need is dynamite. C4 is a great tool for blowing up anything. Now, this is an acronym that I came up with many, many years ago when I was teaching myself the Scrum Framework. This was a way to help me to understand the most important pieces about Scrum. Now, we know there are 5 values of Scrum. So C4 is an acronym for me. C24 as a way for me to remember the values. There are 2 C's. There's courage, there's openness, there's focus. Now, some other cool ways that you can use to remember the values is may the force be with you, FORCC, or you could say, hey, that also sounds like for my foodies out there, that also sounds like and looks like fork, a utensil for eating. Now, this is how we get to professional Scrum, or Sweet 16. I call it Sweet 16 because, hey, I don't know about you, my 16th birthday was unforgettable. Think about your birthday. Hopefully your birthday, too, was unforgettable. Sweet 16. Now, when we get all these elements on the board, we are doing Scrum. Yeah, this is what it looks like. Some other great to know stuff I think will be vital to the Scrum healthiness of your team. Now, backlog refinement, we only do backlog refinement only on the product backlog. You can find this up underneath the section in the Scrum Guide that talks about the product backlog. Okay? It's only a couple of sentences, teams. We do find value out of it. So if we're going to do backlog refinement, just keep in mind, you're going to be adding another event that's happening inside of the sprint time box. So instead of you doing 4 events where your body physically goes to, you will actually be doing 5. So keep that in mind as you plan it out your team's schedule and your cadence. Now, the other thing I want to highlight for you, Scrum is founded on 2 things. Empiricism. Empiricism means we make decisions based upon what is known. Easy way to remember the pillars is TIA. Transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Now, Scrum is founded on 2 things. Empiricism, as I just forestated, and also lean thinking. Lean methodology is all about eliminating waste. The waste of what? The waste of time, the waste of step, anything that you can think of that's wasteful. Lean methodology seeks to eliminate it. Now that we have all the elements on the board, hopefully this makes perfect sense to you. Now notice when we're thinking about empiricism, I've color-coded this graph so that you see what makes things transparent in Scrum. Product backlog, sprint backlog, and where do we do inspection at Scrum? Well, we have 4 formal inspection points. We're inspecting that sprint planning. We're inspecting that daily Scrum. We're inspecting that sprint review. We're inspecting the sprint retrospective. And then what are we adapting? Well, we're adapting the artifacts, in which is making things transparent. The only exception is sprint retrospective. We're not talking about an artifact in sprint retrospective. We're talking about ourselves as people and asking the question of, hey, how can we get better? That is the exception of the rule. For the sprint planning, we look at the product backlog. At Daily Scrum, we look at the sprint backlog. That's the Sweet 16. It's on your screen. Thank y'all for hanging out with me. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to go through the Scrum Framework with you. I hope you got an awful lot of valuable information that you can take into your environment right away and begin executing like a champ. The Scrum Framework is simple, but it does take discipline for you to get to all the 16 pieces of using the Scrum Guide. Those of you who may not have connected the dots yet, let me just go back and recap and review before we close out for the day. Ocean 11 is mechanical Scrum. So how do we get to Ocean 11? If you add up the 3 accountabilities, the 5 events, and the 3 artifacts, you will get the number 11. The ultimate destination is to be at Sweet 16. How do we get Sweet 16? Well, Sweet 16 is, we know that most organizations have in place the 3 accountabilities that are doing Scrum. We know they have the 5 events. We know they have the 3 artifacts, which is the Ocean 11. Okay, but it doesn't stop there. The story doesn't end there. There's more to this deal that we need to implement. And in most cases, if you are a Scrum Master, this is going to be the main thing that you want to be implementing on your team. Commit, courage, focus, openness, and respect, the 5 values. And then when you get that incorporated in your team, you are now doing professional Scrum, aka, as I call it, Sweet 16. Now, for my final visual for you today, I want to show you this here image so that you can understand visually what is the difference between doing Ocean 11 and Sweet 16. Now, when you do the mechanics of Scrum, that is likened to the brain of Scrum. I want you to visualize, I'm thinking about the Wizard of Oz right now, where Tin Man just had a brain, but he was looking for a heart. So when you do Ocean 11, which is the 3 artifacts, the 3 accountabilities, and the 5 events, that's just the mechanics of Scrum. That's you riding a bicycle for the very first time. We ultimately want to get to Sweet 16, and there's several case studies out there that a lot of companies have done just the mechanics of Scrum. And, Scrum is not this, Scrum is not that, Scrum is not what it says it is. But then somebody like me or some other consultant or a professional Scrum trainer go in and say, first of all, you're not doing Scrum. You're still missing some pieces of the puzzle. The story is not complete. Your challenge is to figure out how are you going to get all 16 pieces to be visibly seen, executed, and embodied by your team members, by your organization. Now, the values of Scrum are the heart of Scrum. So can you imagine you as a human being that all you had was just a brain? We will all look like robots. It'd be weird. But what I found in my career that if you lead from the heart versus your brain, 99.9% of the time, I land in a good place. So that's just my tip for you in terms of as you're navigating through these Scrum and Agile waters. Now let's get back to where it all started with this episode. This is your end game in terms of if you really want to have a true Scrum and Agile environment, whether it's just at your local team, whether it's at your organization, this is the ultimate goal. You want to make sure you're embodying and executing, implementing all 16 pieces of the Scrum Guide. By doing that, you will be above average. The next video I'm going to do is to teach you on Agile. When you add that to the equation, that's going to just take you up to a whole nother level. And now you and your team, products, and your organization are going to be on the extraordinary level. Now, the transformational 32, by combining both of those 16 pieces of the Scrum Guide, 16 pieces of the Manifesto of Agile Software Development, you have no choice but to be legendary in terms of how you build your teams, the culture of your teams, the culture of your organization. It is truly legendary. As the Scrum Master, in most cases, what I'm seeing is they've never seen Scrum and Agile. Yeah, they talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. They're not embodying the stuff. But when you get your team to embody this, oh my, woo, something magical. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of this. My next video will be teaching on the Agile Manifesto. As you know it here at Scrumcademy, our mission is to empower you, equip you, and want to foster an environment to help you get to where it is you want to be. My wish for you is to be legendary. I think every individual here on this planet was put on this planet to be legendary. Not just okay, not just good, Great. No, legendary. Legendary. Next steps for you. Read the Scrum Guide every single day. And I'm going to keep saying that. I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to keep saying it. Read the Scrum Guide every day. Read the Scrum Guide every day. But when I got into this game, I read the Scrum Guide or something related to it 4 hours per day. I still read my Scrum Guide each and every day. Because the more I read it, the more it reveals itself to me. I'm still learning. Been in this game for years. There ain't nowhere in the world you can read it 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and think you got it. I promise you don't. Because even when you come to my class, everything that you thought you knew, crush it. While at the same time, I'm teaching you an awful lot of new stuff. So I see you in class. I see you on the next episode. I see you on social media. Be agile, do Scrum, and be legend. See you next video.